But you said you was cleaning stuff off the computer, I
Yeah,
guess.
we're recording now, and I will send your bio out to people so they'll have that information. So we'll start here. So
Okay.
Beverly, thank you so much for being willing to have this interview with Angus and myself for our rewilding community. And we're really grateful for you to spend this time and to share what you're seeing and what's on your heart and mind with our group.
Okay. Thanks. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be
And
here.
one of the things that we were just talking about as we were sort of prepping for this conversation is I was mentioning how when I listened to Beverly share her story of coming to this understanding, she mentioned how she had been teaching a group already and had been sharing what she'd seen, and that somebody recognized what she was teaching was similar to what was being called, what was it called at that time? It wasn't the three principles,
It was called Psychology of Mind.
psychology of mind. And so they recognized that you were naturally, instinctively tapping into the teaching without even having come across the
Yeah, I've
three
never heard of it.
principles or anything like that. And I think that really points to how what we have inside of us is innate, and that yes, it's helpful to have teachers who can help us wake up and see more, but ultimately what's being pointed to is inside of ourselves. And so I just love for you to share anything that makes sense for you to share around that for us.
Okay, yeah, I'd be glad to. And sometimes I don't never know what part of my life is going to come up or what's going to come in the present moment. But let's give it a go.
Okay.
I'm
We're
delighted
game.
to be here, and yeah, I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful for all the things that happened in my life that kind of got me to where I was that day when my boss, my ex-boss, she wasn't even my boss anymore, but she didn't want to let me go, but she had to because they needed me on another project. And she sent these international visitors to a little class I was teaching on the south side of Stockton. And she called it because they were looking for different, like four different aspects or three different aspects of the city. And one was a grassroots effort. And that's what she called what I was doing, which I had no idea. I was just, trying to share something with people because somebody had went and got an understanding to a better way of life. And when I asked them about it, they were very secretive, and when I got to where I was to the 12-step programs, there he was. Then I understood it. And I just determined to myself that I wasn't going to be like that. I don't know if he was, it didn't matter what he was thinking. I just knew that I wanted to be able to, whatever I learned, if it was helpful to me, it might be helpful to someone else. So that's how I started that class. And um, I got a call from Bob Garner, and he's a guy. He starts small businesses in Honduras, not Honduras, maybe it is. He in Belize.
Okay.
Yeah.
He worked with the indigenous people and he helped them start businesses. I'm gonna take this phone off the hook. Hang on one minute.
Okay.
I forgot that.
Get a sneaky sip in.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it off because it's just an hour, and I don't want to be having to think about it.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
anyway, he was a Bob was an interesting man. I had met him and his wife Wendy and their kids briefly. Not I had saw him. I didn't meet the kids. I saw him.
Hmm.
And so anyway, he told me that he suspected that I was naturally doing something that they were calling psychology of mind.
Hmm.
And so I was fascinated. But the thing he said that got my attention the most, just to be honest, was he said that it was a 6-day conference at the Holiday Inn Express. So me being, me being a mother of 5 children and not having many breaks or chances to go to anything away from the kids, man, I got a babysitter and 6 days I was to get to go to this thing. But a funny thing happened on the way there. Me and this guy named Manziel, he worked in Stockton with the drugs, and worked with the drug kids,
Mm-hmm.
the adjudicated youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so he rode down with me. It was my car, but I didn't know how to drive on the freeway that good, so I let him drive. And we couldn't find a place to save our neck. We couldn't find it. It wasn't not like we got now GPS
Yeah.
and all that. This was like
Yeah.
in 90, 91, 90 or 91. We was going by maps, and neither one of us was
Yes.
very good. So we couldn't find it. We knew we was right hovering around it, but we couldn't find it. So pretty soon I just got tired because I'm sitting in the passenger seat and he's driving. And so I looked up, and it was a little hill, and I saw some kids up there swinging on swings. And as an adult, I learned to swing on swings because I didn't get to do that when I was a kid, because I had to watch my younger siblings, my seven younger siblings. So I didn't play. I was a very serious kid because if something happened to the kids, I got it. So I had taught myself to swing as an adult. And so I told him, I said, oh, you know what? I said, let's just forget about it. I said, let's just go up there. Drive me up this hill right here. There's a park at the top up there, and I want to go get on those swings. And he turned around and looked at me like, woman, are you crazy? We're late, and you want to go. And I told him, I said, that's just what I want to do, Manziel. I hope you don't mind too much. So we got up there, and I was swinging one way. And then I started having so much fun. I started twirling the swing around, just laughing and kicking my feet and turning that thing around. And as I was unspinning, I looked down, and there was the Holiday Inn Express, biggest day. And I turned around the swing, and I said, Manziel, there it is right there. Now, I had no idea. This was just pure serendipity.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever you want to call it. Something in me, I was just tired of whatever it was, the drive on the freeway, whatever. But anyway, we saw it, and we saw the road to it from up on top of the hill, because we up top now. And when we got to the conference, I remember walking in the room, and the feeling that was in that room, it hit me. As soon as I opened up the door, I was just filled with this warm light. Everything was light. And at the time, I was studying healthy couples. So I stopped. Manziel went on in the room and got a seat, because some people are embarrassed when they come in. I'm not. So I walked in, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I want to sit. Let me figure out where I want to sit. So I just kind of stood there in the door and got my breath, and I looked around, and I saw this couple. They were probably in their 70s, but they were so shiny, and they looked so brand new. I mean, they were luminous almost, and so pretty. They was just so attractive. So I made my way around the room, went all the way to the back quietly, and went and sat down by this lady, this pretty lady. I don't know if you know Helene Scott in Walter.
I do. No.
Oh, well, you're gonna meet her one day. I hope you do, because she's a gem. She's been around way back in the early days. She was in the first group. And so I sat by them, and I just had this wonderful feeling. And then when I heard what they were talking to, they were answering all these questions I had. People was running from me, scared for me, all the things I was wondering about. They were answering my questions without me saying anything. And when Roger talked, Roger might say something like, well, we have to get to a quiet mind. And I started hearing stuff like, peace be still. I started hearing scriptures. And I was like, wait a minute. I shook my head. I was like, how is he doing this? So I thought he was doing some kind of trick. Because how could this man, I don't even know scriptures at this point in my life. Not like that. Not to just pull, he said one thing and I hear something, but it's in the line of something that is that's in the Bible. And so when the girls from Dade County started talking, that's when I knew that this is what I've been looking for, because in my mind and in my heart, I had put a big question mark. Since I couldn't ask people because people was flipping out on me, and I was living in this very um, condensed world. I didn't go nowhere outside of this world. This
Mm-hmm.
12-step world was my
Mm-hmm.
whole life. So since I couldn't talk to nobody in that life, now here I had a whole room full of people that understood something, and they was answering my questions without me asking them.
Mm.
So I was intrigued. Somebody handed me A Quest for the Pearl and Second Chance, those two books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took them to my room that night and I finished the first one. Can't believe it. I took the phone off the hook. Anyway, I I got those two books and I read the first one and then I reread it and I reread it.
Mm.
And the book was almost reading me. It was like, have you ever picked up something and it felt electric?
Mm.
And then they were saying stuff in the book that I'd never heard anybody say, but I'd wonder about. So I was just like, something open, some kind of something open inside of me. And I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to get back to the conference tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of that 6-day conference, I'm just gonna move it on up. I had shared the room with Bob Graham's daughter. So what we would do she was only like 20, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at night we would talk and she had so many questions. I don't, she just trusted me right away and she started asking me, did I hear them say this and what did it mean? I said, what do you think it meant? Because I wanted to hear her, she's young. I wanted to hear what she was hearing. And so she told me what she thought. And I told her, I said, yeah, I heard that. I said, yeah, I can see how you heard that. I said, but I heard this too. And she said, well, what do you mean? And so I took my time telling her what I felt, coming from in here. And at the end of that 6 days, well, no, it wasn't even 6 days. At the end of about 3 nights, Bob and his wife came up to me. Well, his wife wasn't there, but Bob came up to me with tears in his eyes. And he said, Beverly, he said, I didn't know why I felt so strongly to send you to this conference. He said, but I knew that you knew, and I knew that you knew something extraordinary. And so he said, my daughter had a breakthrough. We've been taking her to 25 years of counseling, and she would hear nothing. And I was listening to him, and I was like, he said, she is right now, she took her stepmom, and she's telling her that she understands what she was trying to do all these years with her, and that she heard it, and she heard it not from in here. She heard it from in here. And that started them. I mean, years later, looking back, I didn't know none of that was going to happen. I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I met my future boss in that conference. I met Roger, who we ended up, becoming like a tag team, going all
Mm-hmm.
kind of places together and stuff like that. But I think the one thing that it did for me is I the description of how we function psychologically
Mm-hmm.
and the piece on listening, you know, um, that leveled the playing field for me in life. Because somewhere in my head, I always thought people were better than me,
Mm.
you know, because I saw myself through all my cracks.
Mm.
And what I got to learn about that was that my cracks are absolutely beautiful and they make up all of who I am. So I started seeing the cracks as part of a design or a mosaic.
Mm.
and that they were absolutely necessary. And I learned that from learning the basics from what was then called psychology of mind. So I got a chance to follow Roger around for about a year. I had a year of uninterrupted learning. You know, everywhere they would go, I would go. And once I understood that everybody is walking around in their own separate thought bubble all the time, that we're all doing this. And then I learned to see the psychological innocence in myself, which was big,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to be able to see and forgive your own self. And then I got curious about things I would have never dreamed to ask my mother about how she grew up and, you know, what her life was like. And I had a way to listen that was absolutely amazing because I could hear her, even in her songs. My mom would sing with this really big voice.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my siblings, it was 9 of us. I was the oldest of, I was the second oldest and the oldest girl.
Mm-hmm.
So we would, oh, my mother would start singing in church and we would want to go. And they'd always ask her to sing. And we were so embarrassed about it, you know. But this lady that I met and loved a lot, I liked her a lot. I spent a lot of time with her. She came up, we walked up to my mother's house one day and she heard my mother singing. She said, Miss Leslie, sing me some of them old 100s. And she sat at my mother's feet and encouraged her to sing for like 2 hours.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, 2 hours. She's sitting on the floor and my mother just eating it up. And so what happened for me was my curiosity. I know now about separate realities.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that she heard something about my mother singing that I couldn't hear. And what
Mm-hmm.
that was, I didn't interrupt them, but I knew on the ride back, I was going to ask her about it. And I knew that she was going to tell me something that I didn't have no reference point for. And that's all it be. A lot of times the misunderstanding with things in life is just because we don't have a reference point for it. I would have never dreamed what she told me because I never lived it like that.
Mm-hmm.
She said where my mom come from and where she came from, because she was like maybe 12 years older than me. She said they lived in the country and the houses were real spread out. It's like in a valley.
Mm-hmm.
She said, so it was a lady named Miss Smith that had a voice like my mother's, a big booming voice.
Mm-hmm.
And in the evening time, after all the work was done and supper and everything, they would go out on the front porch. And Miss Smith would start singing, and every house in that valley would pick it up. And she said, oh, and ooh, girl, when she was telling me this story, ooh, I just got riveting chills. She said how that music was rippling down, each house would pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And all through the valley, you could hear it echoing, that one melody just echoing, like making this beautiful music. And these people
Wow.
live by that. And I felt it. And I looked at my mother and I said, Mom, you was important in your community. You know, that don't sound like much, but for my mother,
Mm-hmm.
and even for me, it gave me such, I felt that love. That was love.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it. And my mother, she was so thankful because she didn't even know how to tell about that. She never told us any stories about her home. Because she said when she left Texas, the only thing she wanted to take from Texas was her hospitality. She hated it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she hated her life there. And so once I heard the thing about the song, then I became curious about other stuff because my mother didn't seem like she knew a lot, but then she seemed like she knew everything, like she was the wizard, you know, the grand dame. I found out that her mother left going to the store when she was 3 years old and never came back,
Oh my goodness.
and never came back. And she just said it kind of soft, but because I had learned to drop and listen, Just drop into that heart space, because I realized I couldn't listen to my parents with my head space anymore because it didn't work. You know, I didn't hear, I was almost certain of it. I didn't hear what they were trying to tell me. So learning how to listen, you guys call it listening deeply. A lot of people call it that, but because I did everything hard, my two tools was a hammer and a drill, you know, anything that was hard. I had to listen softly. So for me, that felt like, you know, I'm dropping into this space. And what it feels like, if I was going to put words in it when I drop here, is, oh, it just feels like there's soft pink rose petals just floating in a gentle breeze, you know, all around me. And so that's how I started hearing, you know. Sid just said there's hearing, and there's hearing. There's listening, you know, and I hated that because I didn't get it. But it was so ideally right. And that's why it's so important to learn the way that we learn, but it's also important to allow your inner wisdom to give you your verbiage, because your verbiage works for you. But it's important too to know that in the beginning we need teachers, we need guides, we need somebody, because can't nobody, this is really a truth that can't be told. We hold it up so that people can see it, but we can never give it. It's a gift that cannot be given. So that's why I had to meet Sid, because it felt very commercial to me. The the trainings, well, number one, they were about a lot of money, because I went to those money meetings where the people were going to decide, Charles Schwab, if they're going to give $5 million for this thing or not. And then I need to explain this to you too. At the time that I came into my recovery, I was a skeptic. I called God the invisible man, and I made jokes about it because I didn't want nobody trying to brainwash me or give me none of that stuff I saw my brother go through, my oldest brother go through when we were little. I was terrified of it. So I used to say this, and it was real. I thought it was cool. I ain't gonna pray to no invisible man. And what I was saying is that I'm not gonna pray to no invisible man. You know, and that's how I thought about it. So I did try to see where people from religious churches and different stuff like that. I tried to see their point, and oftentimes I could, but then there was just something still about it that didn't jive with me. And so after I put that big question mark in the sky, what I'm going to talk about now is personal relationship, having a relationship with the source behind mind, divine mind, not our personal mind, but divine mind. And I didn't know what to call it then, but I just start asking questions to that invisible man that I wasn't finna pray to, but I did pray to him, and I asked him to help me. And then I also said, if you're real, I heard you help Moses, and I heard about all these people that you helped. And I know you helped Miss Essie, because that lady was big and she was fat. She was heavy set and she was smelled, but she left and went somewhere. And when she showed up at our door, there was this light around her. Her skin color changed. Her whole countenance was different. And she told us that she had turned her life over to God. But I knew that whatever she had got and whatever that preacher had that we had been going to church with, it was something totally different. It was different. I could feel it. I could feel the difference. But I wasn't old enough to ask her about it, you know, because where I come from, they'll backhand you if you'll talk to, you know, you ask grown-ups too many questions. Kids were supposed to be seen and not heard. So I never
Mhm.
got to ask her anything, but I never forgot it.
Mm.
So that's what I told him. I said, I know you helped Miss Essie. And I didn't know Moses, but I heard some nice things about it. So I told him, why don't you help me?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, well, if I ever say this or invite this presence into me or to come into me, I thought the ceiling was gonna crack. I thought all the windows were gonna shoot out. I had all these big dramatic ideas. Nothing like that happened that day. I was in a drug house
Mhm.
and I went in that dirty bathroom and I got on my knees and I invited this power inside of myself because I heard that my brother, the youngest one under me, was going to commit suicide. And that's what happened to my oldest brother. And that kind of set me on a 12-year tailspin. So I didn't want to go back there.
Mhm.
So I did this. I was desperate. And nothing dramatic happened. But I remember I started feeling better.
Mhm.
And then I remember something start speaking to me. Like something would say, why don't you go over there in that door? And I'm trying to figure out where is this coming from. I don't know where it's coming from. But it said it again. So I said, I'm going to go over here in this door. So I went in the door. They were hiring people for telecommunicators. And they hired me on the spot. I got a job. I had on rubber thumbs. I didn't even own a pair of shoes. I was out there and I was a mess. And I remember that happened. And then a little while after that, maybe a month or so later, I ended up in a treatment center that you had to go up 20 stairs. My sister told me about it because she had went up there. When she came down, I'm her older sister, so she demanded why didn't I tell her about the disease of alcoholism. And I told her, because I don't know what you're talking about. But I was so curious as to what they had taught her that scared her like that.
Mm.
And she had a big old, this big old pint of vodka. I'd never seen that kind of vodka before, and I'd never seen it since. But I was intrigued, not by what she said, but the power that was
Mhm.
in it. I wanted to know what they taught her, and then I wanted to explain it to her. That was my little sister, my first sister. I was 7 when she was born, so I took
Mm.
her. She was mine.
Mm.
And so when I went into treatment, that was to find out what they had told her that scared her so much. And but I'm gonna tell you this. I tell everybody this. I told the program this. I told Roger this. Sid already knew. But I told them that I don't think if I wouldn't have, because we live in a duality, and one is a form and one is formless. And I believe that the formless is spiritual.
Mhm.
So I got so curious, and really as a little kid, I was always interested more in things that I couldn't see, stuff that people talked about or were scared to talk about. Those were the
Mm.
things I wanted to know. So being an Aries and ambidextrous, but I mostly write with my left hand, I think all those things just went with my energy. You know what I mean? So anyway, I couldn't have did the 12 steps if I hadn't asked that power to come inside of me.
Mhm.
And I think that everything that came after that, I just don't think of myself, not to the degree that it happened for me. Because I'm telling you, when I got impacted, it was an impact that changed my whole town.
Wow.
I mean, it changed my whole town. And it was not, I was a person that would tell you exactly what I thought, didn't care what you thought about it, and I lacked tact. But pretty soon, people that had known me all my life, they didn't say, they said to me, what happened to you? How did you get out? And then someone was whispering, Beverly, can you tell me the secret? What happened? And people and grandmothers,
Mm.
Beverly, please, can you go talk to Akiva? Beverly, can you go talk to Trish? Oh my God, little kids. Can you tell my mother what you learned? Can you, it was just like I didn't want all that. I
Mhm.
didn't want all that. I didn't know all that was gonna come.
Mhm.
So I had to figure out a way. I couldn't stop it though. They heard about something. Have you seen Beverly? Something, God came down. My mother said, God came down from heaven and touched her on her head. She said, that's all I could think. That's all I could think happened. She said, look at my beautiful daughter. And I was like, oh my God, it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot for somebody that was used to people, stay away from her, get away from her. She's crazy, you know, run for your life if she gets mad. you know. Then all of a sudden, these people is Beverly. Oh my God, I just hear every time I turn a corner, I hear good things about you. What has been now 10 years? They was like they was waiting for it to unturn whatever it was, but it didn't. So it was just a lot of fun. And along the way, I came in touch with these three guiding principles that helped me out in such a practical way, in my everyday life, help me out with my children, because I had two boys. My oldest is a son and my youngest is a son.
Mm-hmm.
But I ruled my kids the way my mother ruled me, with an iron fist.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. They better listen to me, because if they didn't, they was going to get it,
Mm-hmm.
And my kids didn't like getting it, so they listened to me. But one day this man told me, he said, your kids love you, but they're scared of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, are you serious? And he said, yeah. He said, it's really true. And I don't know what made me listen to him, because this was pre-treatment. But I heard him. So this thing was working for me even before the days I'm telling you I identified it, because every now and then I would do something really super cool,
Mm-hmm.
super right. It felt good. Everybody around me felt it. But I didn't know how I did it. It was like I was accidentally doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I learned the three principles, man, it was like I had a guided, like a laser beam, to just because I was curious and I wanted to play around with stuff. I'm talking about career. I played
Mm-hmm.
around with my whole career. I just made up stuff, because if Sid said everything in the world was living in a divine dream, everything that we see, somebody thought of it and made it up. So I was like, well, I'm going to start seeing what I can make up. I'm serious. So I was starting to hear about people having 3 o'clock tea in France or Italy or somewhere, and I know they had siestas in Mexico. So I said, I really would like to have a job where I'm home and before my kids get home from school. Have time to chill out a minute, get dinner, have dinner ready. Next thing you know, just like voila. Next thing you know, I'm living in what I was speaking of, and I was just thinking about it and spoke it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
know that thing that says, as a man believes in his heart, so is he.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of power to that, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I called it just playing around with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if I saw something I didn't like, then I said, well, wait a minute. I step back from it and I deliberately go back to the drawing board, but I'd also pray and ask for help in seeing it different. And I talked to people. I went to therapy. I did a lot of things to help myself on a lot of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't afraid to do it. And I shared everything. My life is an open book. I shared everything about myself if I was prompted to from the inside. So I
Mm-hmm.
spoke a lot. And so a lot of people said that helped them a lot. But sometimes it was too personal for the work that I began to do. So I had to learn how to just tell it in a general way.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, you said so much. I'm curious, you didn't sort of get to saying what it was like when you met Syd. What was that like
Oh,
for
I had to
you?
meet Sid. I had to
Yeah.
meet Sid because me and Roger used to get we get in kerfuffles. And Roger didn't want me to be me. He wanted me to say things the way he said them because that's what everybody was doing. You know, if Roger held his hand a certain way, they were just like, to me, they were like parrots. I can't be a parrot. I'm just not. This is not me. And so I said, well, so I'd say something, and then he would take me to the side and tell me, Beverly, you're not saying, you really stunt people's growth when you do that too, because you know it made me feel like I wasn't appreciated from him. But the response that I was getting from the audience was something else, you know. And so it was it had me feeling kind of ambivalent, you know, like something's wrong, because he kept saying it's not a spirit, it's not spiritual. See, they kept didn't want to say it was spiritual because that was cutting in on the business aspect of it, or they felt like it was, you know, people wouldn't pay the grant money and stuff like that if it looked like anyways like religion or spiritual. And I just was like, I don't know how it can't be spiritual. I feel the spirit with every fiber of my being, you know. And he said, Beverly, if you don't mind, I just like for you to say this and say that. So I felt restricted when I talked. But then if we got in the training, I just had to be myself.
Yeah.
But it caused like this little unrest between us. But it was okay, because one day he told me, he said, well, why don't you call Syd and ask him what he thinks about it? So I said, okay. And I was scared to call Syd, but then I called Syd. I said, Syd, he said, tell him exactly what happened and then see what he thinks about it. And to this day, I called Syd. What Syd told me was so reassuring to who I was and to what I was doing, that I never ever considered anything else, because it was spiritual principles. He said, I keep telling them that. They didn't want to, it took them a while. You know, if you go back and look at the early tapes, I'm not talking about Syd's tapes, because Syd talked about Christ, he talked about divine mind, he talked about everything in the early days, and way before I got there and while I was there. But he said, well, I'm not going to repeat what he said because it was so wonderful. My ears couldn't hardly hear it, but it let me know that I was on the right track and to keep on that track. And that someday it would evolve and I'd see it evolve. And don't get hung up on saying things a certain way. Don't get hung up on the language, because the language is going to change. I don't care who you are and how well it's going. In time, the language is going to change. But the feeling has to remain magnetic. It has to remain powerful. You know, it has to be where people become curious and they want it. You know, people, oh my God, you know, they just feel like if they could just touch you and or whatever. I don't know what happens, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't necessarily understand what happens when we sit down and have these type of meetings, and what that energy is that fills the whole room. I don't exactly understand how it all works, but I know it does. And it works best when I abandon myself and surrender to the moment and just be open to whatever. I allow what wants to speak through me, I let it speak. Because I had a terrible temper. I had a lot of love too. If I love you, one thing about me is loyalty. You know, my friends, they knew I loved them to pieces, but my circle was so tight. And I'm still kind of like that. Every now and then I'll meet, like last year I met two people, and I checked them out. I was kind of listening and everything. And I said, well, it's time to meet some new people. You were one of them. And I really had a good, I asked you, let me ask you whatever I needed to ask. And I got this feeling from the inside of me. Yeah, you need to do whatever she's trying to do it. You know, just whatever help you could do it. I said, okay. And then sometimes you'll try to, people, they call me peculiar, which I don't mind. because I already knew I was peculiar, and so are you.
We'll be peculiar together. Angus is definitely
I
peculiar.
said, when I say you, I'm talking about y'all. I know my people. It's good to be peculiar because it's a rarity. It's
Mm,
rare.
Yeah.
And when people meet it, they don't know what it is, but they long for it. And their hearts open,
mm,
you know, their hearts open. And when they leave with an open heart, it affects everything in their life across the board.
yeah.
So the gift it carries a lot of responsibility, and I've learned to use it very wisely. And I don't squander it. Like I don't go everywhere I'm asked to come.
Mm-hmm.
I just go where I'm led to go,
Mm,
and it's worked. That works for me.
mm-hmm.
And what happens is, it ends up being such a, I hate that word magical because everybody's using it now, but it really is a magical journey. When you just take a chance and then you let it go, which I don't care where it goes, but I don't want nobody just telling me to my face that they tell me to put stuff in my mind that they're going to do certain things. And why would you tell me that? People are just people, and we do what we can the way it makes sense to us, because we think we know the other person's motivation. But if people wondered why I did something, if they would ask me, I would tell them, because they never guessed me. I'm
Right.
not an easy guess. My heart, you could think in one thing and I'm way over here somewhere else. But if
Yeah.
you ask me, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you just innocently and honestly, straight, oh, that's why I did that. And then when they
Mm-hmm.
hear why I did something, they say, I would have never guessed that in a million years. And I've heard that 1,000 times.
Mm,
So that's
yeah.
why it's me. My asker, I don't know. I think my asking has gotten a lot better, but I will ask, instead of wonder about stuff. If I can find out from the person, I'll ask. And then I have to let go of is my delivery going to be ratchet or whatever? Because the most important thing is an understanding is the best thing in the world. And it's said in so many places. That's why they wrote a song about it. That's why the scripture said, above all things, get thee an understanding. Is because with understanding, when we pray for understanding and we seek understanding, we ain't got wisdom, we can pray and ask for it. We can pray for all this stuff, just ask for it in your heart. Speak it out loud if you want to, but just ask for it, because with understanding, we'll see an avenue, or we'll hear from whence that thing came, and it will never be what we don't have no reference point for why other people do what they do. But we know that everybody's doing the best they can based on how they're viewing life.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's intentional, right or wrong, I don't have to agree with it. I just want to understand it, so that with that understanding, I can say, I get it. I see how you see that. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
don't mean I approve of it.
Mm-hmm.
That don't mean I would do it,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand where you're coming from. And as far as I'm concerned, for you, and the way you understand that and the way you doing it, that's okay for you. Then I decide, I got a responsibility. I'll decide if I want to go that way or not,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Mm-hmm.
probably already have decided. But understanding is the best thing in the world. And it
Yeah.
leads us to peaceful interactions with other people, even when they could be as far off as, just an example. That day that all the votes came in,
Mm-hmm.
I guess because I'm Black, people send me they send me all kind of stuff they think I'm gonna find humorous. But some of the stuff I got that day was horrifying to me. I mean, I started crying. It
Mm-hmm.
was so sad. I was like, so I waited. I couldn't respond to it, and then I said, well, I know they thought it was really, really funny, all these little things they was making, but I had heard something in those days before, and this is the one thing that I heard President Trump say. And when I heard him say it, I had to turn a cup over because the spirit of truth was so boom, like that. The spirit of truth just rang. And this is what he said. He said, well, I don't lose easy. I don't lose well. That's what he said. But what it carried, the power behind his words, and that's what I told one of my friends, Joe. I said, I think we celebrating a little premature. I said, I don't want to laugh at nothing. I said, I think we need to be praying for the president. We need to be praying for the vice president. We need to be praying for. I keep them in prayer. I don't agree with nothing, hardly. That's the only thing I ever heard him say that I agreed with, that I heard and I agreed with. Because I saw something and I heard something that was so powerful. I'm not telling you that I agree with anything, but I understand that this person in life is doing what makes sense to him. So I didn't want to ask nobody, no people about it. I asked the spirit about it. I said, I want to know, why am I saying this? And why am I saying that? I'm still doing that same thing that I was doing back in 1986. I'm still doing it. And one day I came in my room and someone said, turn the TV on. I wasn't planning to watch TV, so I turned the TV on. And I caught the middle of this story. And it was about this man named Roy Cohn, Cohen. And I said, someone said, watch this. See, I don't know if you guys probably get this sometimes. Something just leads you to watch something. It didn't make no sense. It was old time, like in the 20s, or I don't know what it was, but I was like, okay. So I started watching it and I was like, oh my God. I said, this man sounds like Trump. I was just like, but I came in on the middle. So I went into the information and I saw that it was going to come on again, but it was going to be like in 3 or 4 days. So without knowing any of it, I saw the end of it and what happened to him and how his life turned out. And then I had to wait 3 or 4 days and I saw the beginning. And in the beginning, this man was, his protege? Something. Anyway, this man from the age of 23 years old trained Donald J. Trump. And it told the whole story. And the story had been out since it was like a year or 2 years old, but it was available right on television. I was like, what is people search their understanding, because I have friends, people that I have loved 30 years that changed, over the last 6 or 7 years. For one thing, they bought property in rural California. So they was telling me about, I joined the Tea Party. I was like, oh, okay. I said, well, how you like it? Oh, I love it because this and that and that and this. So I didn't say anything because I always try to understand where somebody's coming from. So I didn't talk to him for a while. I talked to him again. And so then they was telling me some other stuff. Well, we're forming we want to form a new California, a new state. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we want you and Bill to come out. Now we've been out there 2 times. They moved way out, like on the edge of you have to drive through a lot of little mountains to get to where they live. So I was like, I love you, kid. I said, but I'm not coming. I said, okay, we'll come again soon. But I knew I wasn't going back up there and then finally she said, Beverly, what's wrong? I said, hey, kid, I said, the stuff you're doing scares me. She said, well, what scares you about it? I said, the Tea Party, the stories I heard about the Tea Party and what all these different things mean. She said, well, I'm not like that. I said, I know you're not like that, but your new friends, can you account for your new friends? And then she got kind of quiet, and then she said, well, I wouldn't bring you around none of them that was really, like that. But I was like, mm-mm. I
Mm.
didn't go, but I understood that it was something that I still love her.
Mhm.
I still love her, but I didn't get the full scope of what was going on until this week, you know,
Mhm.
Mm.
back.
Mhm.
And it was just a feeling
Mm.
that I could feel because I learned to listen beyond the words.
Mm.
Didn't have no evidence or no
Mhm.
concrete, details, but I felt it.
Mhm.
And that thing guides my life. It guides my life in and out of situations all the time. And it's a blessing.
Mhm.
It's really, really a blessing because it helps when you're talking to people. They want to tell you stuff, but they can't. And so when you hold a space for them and you listening while they're speaking, then you hear things that they don't say.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then we take chances, we speak to that. And then it was like, well, did I tell you that? I said, that's kind of what I heard. Is it accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what's going on, because if you're going to come and talk to me, then at least have the decency, the commonness to tell me what it is you want to talk about, beating around the bush. And then, but I do that with some people in my family, especially, I'll help them like pull out the little teeth and stuff. But then I stopped doing it a little while ago. I said, I'm not doing that anymore. If you don't speak specifically to it, I'm not going to try to help
Mhm.
you. That's not helping you. You have to learn how to be
Mhm.
articulate what it try to do best you can, you
Mm.
know.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beverly, I heard a lot about you before I met you, and
Really?
the way that people would talk about you would be describing you like a force of nature. And
Ooh,
and the way that I see that from listening to you now is that you talk about giving that part of you a voice, that still quiet space inside of you a voice.
mhm.
Um, and you make it sound like that is your spiritual GPS. And you're just willing to shout that from the rooftops when it shows up. And I think that's why people really love you, because you just make no bones about it. I'm being
No.
led by spirit, by this GPS, and I want to share this wisdom with the world. And I think that's why it has so much resonance. Even when people were telling you, try using different words here, using different verbiage, but you're still not. No, I'm going to share what's true for me, and I think that's
Yeah,
just a really beautiful thing.
yeah.
And I really love you for that.
Thank you. I love you guys too for creating so many opportunities for so many people. I'm so turned on by y'all's work. It's a lot for me, but I mean, it's saturating and just the right thing for so many others. I love that. Thank God for you
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and I want to echo what Angus is saying about that knowing that you have, and that knowing that you've had all along, even though, as you said, sometimes it was just glimpses. It's
Yeah.
always been there. It's always been there, and having support, having guidance, allowed you to become more conscious of it and share it even more intentionally, not just for yourself, but with others.
Yeah.
But your commitment to being of service is just so clear. Your commitment to being used by God and allowing that spirit to come through you is so palpable. And I just so appreciate that generosity that you have and how generous you've been with us here, not just in your time, but in your complete givingness of that, your willingness to step aside in the personal way and just allow what wants to come through to come through. I think that's just so inspiring.
Yeah. I hope I didn't. One thing I hope I really got across was that in the early days when I would hear that voice, but I come to love it so much because I don't have to depend on hearing things from humans when I have the ability to just speak it, just ask in my heart. And at first I didn't trust it,
Mm-hmm.
because first time I heard it say, go tell your friend that her father to get ready, get ready. Her father's getting out of prison after doing 38 years in Angola. And I fell on my face. I was like, I was crying so hard. You know, I was like, what a terrible thing for me to make up to tell my friend, you know? And I was like, oh my God, you know, I was horrified. And then but I didn't move. I laid there and I waited and waited. And then it said it again. Go tell Vivian to get ready, get ready. Oh my God. All the way to the hour-and-a-half commute to get to work. I was still crying because I didn't trust it yet.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I told her because I had to, my heart started hurting. I went and told her and her 80-year-old mother, which that was her husband they was talking about. And about 2.5 months later, a miracle happened. Her dad got out of Angola Penitentiary. Brian Gumble sent a 10-camera crew to come to my classes and to film him. And they got to stay at the Waldorf Astoria in presidential suites. I didn't, they did. But but it happened. And it was so the pain of telling her that not having developed the trust, it made me physically sick. And when I told her, when I delivered the message, I didn't want to think about it anymore. You know what I mean? So he done got out, they done had the party, they done went to all these different places. And then I was so happy for him, you know, because I experienced other people's joy like it's mine. And so my joy will always be full. Something happened good to you, I'm gonna be so happy for you. You know, my joy will always be full. So I'm so over the top in the mood, and I'm just jumping up in there in my high heels and, you know, holding my stomach, going down like this. And I'm saying, oh my God, this is just too much. I can't believe this is happening, you know. And she turned around and looked at me. She said, what do you mean you can't believe it? I said, girl, look at that. You know, and she said, you the one came and told us. And I was like, I said, no, you don't. Oh, no. I said, I was the messenger.
Yeah.
I was the conduit.
Yeah.
That was not me. That did not come from me. How could I know something? No. But then I remembered that was true, you know, but that's kind of how we have to live with it. It's like a fine line between, you know, something happens, you can't take credit for that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you know it's not you.
Yeah.
Just a chance.
But over time, you trust it when it says, let me have you, you know.
The
Get clear,
impersonal.
you know, and then that trust comes, but it takes a while, you know, for us to, but until we get there, just faith it until we make it.
I love that. I love that. That's a t-shirt.
That's a beautiful point to end on. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Is it over?
Yeah, we want to be respectful of your time. We've gone over.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate just, again, the beautiful feeling that you bring with you and that will be rippling out from this conversation with our group. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And we hope to be able to have more conversations with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you look so queenly today, my queen. I just love that. Oh, I love your hair up like that. I love you too.
We love you very much.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to pause the video and then we can just say goodbye.